So I'm sorry to break it to you, but there's no such thing as African Americans.
Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going over this young lad who is bamboozled by the fact that an African American could not tell him which African country he's from. Let me play his video as well as the responses to his video, and then I'll come back later to give my thoughts.
Bro, I don't know if Americans are genuinely confused or they're just thick, because this blew my mind. And if you're not American, this will probably blow your mind too. So I'm from England, right? But most English people are usually white, just like Americans are usually white too, okay? Keep that in mind, this is very important. As you can see from looking at my skin, I am not just white, I have black in me, which means I come from African descent. To be more specific, Ghanaian descent. Keep this in mind. I was outside in America and I seen a fellow melanin brother. Now, when I'm looking at melanin people, I can usually tell what part of Africa you are from your features. And I saw this brother that I thought might have been Ghanaian too. Big up my Ghana brothers, by the way. But was I so wrong? So I proceeded to ask, yo bro, what part of Africa you from? He said, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I was like, oh word, but like, where are your parents from? Atlanta, Georgia. So what about your grandparent? Atlanta, Georgia. So my next question was, how are you black? There's a lot of black people in Atlanta, Georgia, son. So you're telling me that you're not from Africa, but your skin is saying otherwise. Yep, proud African American, straight out of Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised. And before I could ask him any more questions, brother, I answered it for myself. These people genuinely think that African American is its own race. And this is actually deep, bro. These African Americans are children. Yes, you heard me right. So I'm sorry to break it to you, but there's no such thing as African Americans. Your ancestors were just taken from Africa to America, brainwashed, and completely forgot where they came from. And that's the truth. So maybe go look at your history before saying I'm African American. Bro, I don't know if Americans are genuinely confused or they're just thick, because
This video is actually really fucking insane, and shows that maybe on topics like this, the British should just keep their fucking mouths shut. So to start off, the idea that African Americans aren't real is kind of fucking insane. African Americans is a label that black people in the US use because slavery caused them to not know where they are from. You have people who are here in the US today whose entire family's bloodline has basically been here since the beginning because of slavery. They don't know where they're from. All they've known is the US, all their grandparents have known is the US, all their great-grandparents have known is the US. And if you opened up a history textbook, you would also know that they purposefully separated out these slaves from each other. They made sure that they bunched them up with people that they weren't familiar with and didn't speak the same language with, so they couldn't collude with each other. And one last thing, y'all always say this about African Americans, but I never hear y'all have this smoke for like Jamaicans or like Haitians, when both of those were slave colonies too. All in all, a very cringe video, but I expect that out of the British.
These people genuinely think that African American is its own race. And this is actually deep, bro. These African Americans are children. Yes, you heard me right. So I'm sorry to break it to you, but there's no such thing as African Americans. Our ancestors were just taken from Africa to America, brainwashed, and completely forgot where they came from. And that's the truth. So maybe go look at your history before saying I'm African American.
Hello, my friend. African American isn't its own race, but it definitely is its own ethnicity. For it has every qualifying factor to be considered an ethnicity. You need to remember that there is a strong difference between the idea of race, the idea of ethnicity, and the idea of nationality. It seems that you're well aware that African American people have had their identity and connection to Africa purposely severed, meaning the formation of their new unique identity began in America. So why are you confused that these populations are referring to themselves as American? Now tell me, if you were to go up to a white American and ask them where they're from, and they were to respond with Atlanta, Georgia, would you also be this confused? If not, why not? Unlike African Americans, these populations didn't have their identity stripped away from them, their heritage stripped away from them. Anyways, the idea of race, identity, and nationality, their differences, I talked about them before, so look for it on my account.
They forgot where they came from. And that's the truth. So maybe go look at your history before saying I'm African.
I find it funny how y'all never have this smoke to Caribbeans and Afro-Latinos, just African Americans, when we quite literally and figuratively was on the same boat. I don't have smoke for them either, because this is such a stupid discourse. I hate the whole idea we forgot where we came from, because we quite literally did it. Take sweet potatoes, or as black people call them, Yams, for example, we call them yams because that was the closest thing our West African ancestors had to their original food. Or take the banjo, for example. Once again, created by enslaved West Africans and now is a staple to Black Southern culture, is closely related to the West African instrument atongan. We never forgot our past. We just used our multitude of West African identities to create something new and beautiful.
Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised. And before I could ask him any more questions, brother, I answered it for myself. These people genuinely think that African American is its own race.
And I can tell just off rip by the way you're speaking, you have a white mother. Okay? You have a white mother in a country that is known for colonizing in the world. You got a little too much dip on your chip. Remember, you're only half Negro. Let's start there. You ever heard of Chinese American, Mexican American? Any of those? No. Okay. So what happens is when there's X amount of generations that are so far removed from the location of the place, or what can also be known as the nationality of the place, some places their nationality and ethnicity are combined. Some places no, because it's way too much of a melting pot. America is not a solely white place. When you think of Americans and you think of white, that comes down to your perception, not of what it is. America has always been a melting pot, okay? Even when they first got here, they was melting with the Native Americans. Did they kill them off? Yes. But it was never straight white people. So that told me this nigga was fucking, ooh, hello. But again, based on your mother and your country, sweetie, I know. Anyways, nationalism and ethnicity are, again, two different things. So it's okay to be African and still be American. And you have to understand, too, y'all making these comments isn't because you guys don't actually know what we're talking about when we say what we're saying. Y'all make those comments to be nasty. Because y'all have nasty souls and spirits. It's always been obvious. Because if you know that a group of people have a stark history known around the world to be displaced from their home, thrown into a different land, and then for the next close to 400 years been facing oppression and just trying to make a home for themselves on this new land, and you want to follow up with questions like, where exactly in Africa are you from? You know what you're doing, you trick ass bitch.
So I proceeded to ask, yo, bro, what part of Africa you from? He said, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
That's literally because that's the farthest he can trace his ancestry to, which is common for every black person in North and South America. When Africans were brought over here as slaves, their heritage was stolen from them. Often their children were stolen from them after birth so they couldn't raise them with their own heritage and histories. The goal was to steal their sense of identity so they would not know who they were. And documentations as to where an African was stolen into slavery were rarely kept. And the ones that were certainly weren't preserved to this day. And this is basic history that any 10-year-old in North and South America could tell you. Find any random child in Brazil and translate this to Portuguese and they'll be able to give you an answer. It's ironic that you would post a video looking down on other people when, you know, your video kind of sounds slow. Honestly, I've rarely seen a Brit who doesn't know this basic history. Especially if that Brit was literally living in the United States at that time. You should take that video down.
Bro, what part of Africa you from? He said, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
So in the midst of this rant, it becomes very obvious that the original poster doesn't know the difference between race, ethnicity, and nationality, and has little to no understanding of black history in the United States of America. Like, I've heard these conversations so much that I think I've come to a point where I can identify where the disconnect and the misunderstanding is between black Brits and African Americans. And it essentially comes down to a difference in our histories and how we arrived in our respective countries. So I'm going to try and break it down for you guys. Now, if I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me in a respectful way. But as far as I know, a lot of the current black British identity starts with the Windrush generation, where England invited a bunch of black people from the Caribbean to come over to the UK and help rebuild the country after it was destroyed during World War II. And then in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, people from Africa started immigrating to the UK. So now today, most black Brits are like second, third, maybe even fourth generation immigrants from the Caribbean and Africa. And because of that, many of you look at black Americans and assume that the history is the same or at least similar, and it's just not. For African Americans, many of us arrived here as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, for context, the slave trade in the U.S. goes back as far as 1619. Not the 1940s, but the 1600s. So we're comparing decades to centuries. African Americans are not recent immigrants to the U.S. in the way that black Brits are to the UK. So I think that's like a huge chunk of the story that many of y'all seem to be missing. So like, even like with me, I can go back well over 10 plus generations and still be in the United States of America. Because that's how long my family has been here on both sides. And I don't think that's a thing for black people anywhere in Europe, let alone the UK. So when you want to have conversations like this, you have to make sure that you have a functional understanding of the histories of the people and places that you're talking about. It's also worth noting that when Africans were being trafficked into the United States, Africa did not look the way it does today. So like the modern concepts of Ghana and Nigeria and the Congo, that's not what it was back then. My grandparents are older than damn near every country in Africa. I also find it funny that when this conversation comes up, the only people who are expected to kind of explain themselves are African Americans, even though we're not the only ones who got trafficked into a country on the Western Hemisphere. Now, as you can see from this map of the transatlantic slave trade, slaves were getting trafficked all over the place, like South America, Central America, the Caribbean. But for some reason, when a black person who was a descendant of slavery tells you that they're from America, it's like just all logic goes out the window and y'all just don't understand it. But if he would have said he was from Brazil or Guyana or Jamaica or Panama or anywhere else, you would have fully accepted that. So I never understood that. But I'm going to leave you with this because I know that you do live in the United States right now, and that opens up so many opportunities for you to learn about African American history and culture. Like, you can go to a HBCU homecoming, go to the African American History Museum in DC, go to a soul food restaurant, do something, but you can't just be loud and ignorant like that. Like, do better.
Proceeded to ask, yo, bro, what part of Africa you from? He said, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
What really pissed me off about this, y'all never asked Jamaicans or Haitians or Puerto Ricans, where y'all really from? Because we all got to these places around the same time, 400 years ago. Our ethnic group has been in America for 400 years. I mean, even if we do know what African countries we come from, like me, I'm Gullah Geechee, so I know that I'm probably from Sierra Leone and Senegal. But, like, I'm African American, so when you ask somebody where they from or where they parents from, where they great-great-parents from, we're from America. 400 years, my guy. 400 years. And I don't think y'all understand it, because y'all immigrated to the UK by choice. We came here by force.
So you're telling me that you're not from Africa, but your skin is saying otherwise?
Y'all know what time it is. Okay, says here you have a $1,500 rent fee that's due at the beginning of this month.
Why? Rent for what?
What you mean, why? You made this video for no reason, and we clearly in your head rent free. We don't even know y'all like that. And here it says you got a $300 clout chasing fee.
A clout chasing fee for what?
What is you talking about? Clearly you're chasing clout because literally all your videos have nothing to do with us, but I guess your views ain't looking the best, so you decided to make a video on us. So we'll take that in cash or money order. We also have a $200 ignorance fee because clearly you ain't did your research on why African Americans don't know where they come from. We're sick of explaining it to you, but clearly you ain't gonna learn. So now we're charging y'all $200. You know what? I'm getting pissed. $400. $400. Now the rest of you crumpet eating, beans and toast for breakfast having heifers and dudes out there, shut up unless you do some darn research. Shut up.
Firstly, the speaker being a mixed person, he can't necessarily regard himself as black. I mean, yes, the black side of his family is Ghanaian, but he also has European ethnicity, which would be very unfair of him to deny, since he has both ethnicities in his blood. And no, a typical American is not white. America is not a white continent. The white people that you see in America are of European descent. Let's not forget that they were colonizers. So for you to say that Americans are typically white, that's something wrong for you to say. That's just an inaccurate statement, because America is a mixing pot, like that lady said. It's a melting pot of different people. So you can't just say, oh, an American is typically white, so I assumed that the black people that would be in America are not from there. The white people that are in America are also not from America. They are of European descent. So why is the question of where are you from only applicable to African Americans and not to the European Americans? I mean, it is very disingenuous to ask an African American which part of Africa that they're from. If the young lad does some research, it's easy to see that African Americans are unable to tell exactly which part of Africa they are from because of all the mixing of the different African slave tribes. And not to forget that there's also a mix of slave owners, also known as the Europeans. Their DNA is also mixed into the equation of the African Americans we see today. I mean, look at the ancestry results of this person. You can clearly see that the results are complex, and this person cannot just claim one country as where they are from. Because what happens to the other countries that are apparent in their results? And no, African American is not its own race, but they are a group of people whose forefathers were removed from their home continents and were taken to another land where they lived for hundreds of years. I mean, in those hundreds of years of being in this land, all the different slave tribes had to come together and form their own new tribe in order to build a sense of community and familiarity. In them coming together, they had to adjust and adapt their customs and cultures to suit the new place of residence, and hence over all those generations, African Americans and Africans were slowly becoming different and estranged because they lived on two different continents and had two different experiences. Whilst African Americans and Africans experienced similar ordeals, aka colonization, aka slavery, there are still differences which warrant the classification of Africans and African Americans. Anyways, that's where I'll park the bus for this video. What are your thoughts on this matter? Please leave a comment down below and consider liking and subscribing to see similar content and also to help this channel grow. Thank you and bye.